I believe that a painter must know his or her origins in order to experience transcendence. Where do you come from? What place glued your bones together into the shape of you? I live and work in New York City, a very dynamic and sophisticated place, yet I tend to resemble more of a slightly doughy golf pro than a dazzling urbanite, to borrow a phrase from Blazing Saddles, one of my favorite movies. My wife Katie and I go to fancy parties and receptions, and we wear all black, yet I am never more than one burp away from the total beach bum that I really am, with sandals, shorts, and a t-shirt. I do not take myself very seriously, yet I do know on which side my bread is buttered. I understand my origins. They form the millwork of the paintings that I make today. As a child of the American South, I was taught to drink in the details of the local landscape. A flower wasn't just a flower, but a blue water hyssop or a southern marsh canna. A bird wasn't just a bird, but a red-footed booby. Barbecue sauce was not just a condiment, but it was light or heavy tomato base, or mustard base, or vinegar base. The beauty hides in the details, and part of the job of a painter is the magnification of details. I was down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina a couple of days ago, in the resort town where I grew up. And I decided to take the same walk that I did in the roughly 615 Saturdays of my childhood, from our house down the sidewalk by the creek and into the golf course at the end of the block, and sit by the lakes that I used to sketch by as a kid. And I'm the product of three environments. The artificial and beautifully manicured environments of golf courses, the neon glow of arcades and amusement parks, and the ancient rivers and marshes and swamps of the low country of South Carolina. I developed very early on a love for and an obsession with oyster shells, and I would lay on my stomach and hold those delicate rippled little puddles of pale mud and salt water in my hands, and I would imagine diving into that salt water, swimming around in the shell like a big swimming pool. And I realized that wasn't just the daydreaming of a child, but it was laying the foundation for the way that I would have to think as a painter all these years later. That logic and all sense of scale have to go out the window, that we have to reset ourselves into these artificially created environments and experiences that are paintings. The viewer and the artist wrap nervous systems around one another and manufacture a world that wasn't there before. It is a collaborative experience. So I believe that I am the product of all three of those environments in high-speed collision. That is my origins. And it has nothing to do with memory. Memory and nostalgia sells it far too short. Painting is not about memory. Memory implies the recreation of an experience or the reliving of some type of seduction. Painting is not about memory. It's about experience, and experience is open-ended. It is the closest that I can get to taking you by the hand and us diving together into one of those rippled little puddles of salt water and pale mud. Here's a poem very dear to my heart. This was written by the late Samuel Minash. And what I want to discuss vis-a-vis this poem is the notion of extreme shifts in scale in painting. The first line of the poem, "Rippling under my eyes," is as foreground as you can possibly get. The second line, "Bulrushes tuft the shore," is way distant background. So in just a handful of words, he is catapulting us from very close to very far. This is something I do in my paintings all the time. I paint very big things, warm-hued things with sharp edges and thick paint to occupy the extreme foreground. Then I skip the middle ground entirely and I take the viewer's eye to the distant background with cooler hues and softer transitions. A very extreme jump from close to far away. What that also embodies for me is a kind of declaration of love from the artist to the viewer, as if you're saying, it's okay, you can go all the way over there, it's safe. And the way that I know that it's safe is because I've been there. I think that's important in our job as painters, to always have the viewer's back, to make them feel that they can go behind things, curl up in every nook and cranny in the painting that we need them to, and always feel part of the lasso of the painting, as if it's already been seen from every possible vantage point and is already warmed up before they ever even stand in front of it. What those extreme shifts in foreground, background also suggest to me is the notion that all art is at its very core a political statement. Whenever I hear painters or instructors talk about making political art, I laugh. I think all art is at its core a political statement. The artist is using seduction in order to alter or change the way that we see the world. They are also using a system or a series of events that will take the viewer logically from this step to that step, and that at its very, very base level is political, in my opinion. You can make a painting about fracking, that's fine, that's topical subject matter, but I'm talking about the very chassis of what we do is a political act. A Renoir flower still life is just as much of a statement. The other word that I think bears re-examination that I think about a lot is the word decorative. Matisse was decorative, and you often hear instructors use that word pejoratively, as if a painting has to be ugly or severe in order to be good. All visual art at its very essence is decorative. The artist is assembling visual material in a way to engage the eye and the intellect, and hopefully to delight the eyes. That's really hard to do successfully. I study everything from French mosaic miniatures to 18th century Rococo tapestries to carnival banners that you would see at a state fair to better understand and recognize strong decorative acumen, how to put things together decoratively. That is an important component in the work that I do. It's not all that I do, it has to go beyond that, but I am working with visual material. And whenever I hear painters use that word in the negative, you know, it makes me think that they couldn't make a strong decorative painting if their 18th century powdered asses depended on it. Here's a little bit of quinacridone red, which is a cool transparent red, mixed with ivory black, which is a semi-transparent black. I'm going to then bring in some titanium white to lighten the value, bringing it to kind of a smoky, dull plum pink color. Then a little bit more titanium white, lighten it one more time. It's fairly pasty at this point. I'm going to thin the consistency down now with a little bit of galkyd, which is an alkyd resin, followed by a few drops of poppy oil, which will slow the drying time down. Then I just tap the knife into that and fold it into the color, giving it kind of a runny, kind of glistening consistency, which I like, especially for wet into wet. Then a little more titanium white, which is the whitest of the whites, to bring the value up once again. And I'm going to use this new plum pink color as a host color, meaning I'm going to work in several other colors into this. So every part of the painting that I work on today will have the pink as its DNA. Here's a little bit of cadmium orange. These are beautiful transition moments. It's all about the transitions. Each color just a breath of itself. A little bit of radiant yellow. And I like to leave the remnants of colors on the knife or the brush before I go into a new color. Just it sometimes gives me often some really nice surprises. Some cerulean blue here with a little bit of yellow left over to green it. It's a beautiful day here in New York City. Tonight my solo show at Forum Gallery opens. I've had 162 solo and group exhibitions in my career to date, and I get just as nervous before every single one of them. I've done this long enough never to try to anticipate or predict what the response will be, both to the work and the turnout for the opening reception. I've had openings where it was so packed, nuts to butts, with a line waiting to get in. And I had a show in Detroit 15 years ago where I could count on one hand how many people came to the opening. In fact, I bought them all beers afterwards. I have a few superstitious habits which help relax me on the day of an opening reception. I always have lunch in Chinatown, where I am right now. I always put 5 Tylenol in my left pants pocket and 5 Altoids in my right pants pocket before I go to the gallery. Back in the 90s, I had a solo show in Boston, and I accidentally put Tylenol PM in my pocket, and I fell asleep as I was talking to people at the after party. I also keep a small laminated picture of the planet Neptune in my pants pocket, which reminds me how insignificant all of this really is.
All of my solo shows carry titles that refer to water. This one refers literally to the way that I learned how to see the world. Laying on my stomach with an ant's eye view of the landscape, my mouth full of the taste of salt water, with extreme foreground right under my chin, and then extreme background in the distance. I still try to get that vantage point laying on my stomach, but at 6'3", it looks much creepier now. The tonalities in this particular show, I think, have been broadened. There's more glazing here and a more gradual series of transitions in the colors. There's also a prevalence of gray mixed into a lot of the palette here. My favorite gray is quinacridone red, viridian green, and titanium white. The color gray also refers to 2 of my favorite American painters, John Singleton Copley and Raphael Peale, both whose work use that gray tonality throughout their palettes. Both Copley and Peale also make pictures that connote a deep sense of stillness. And although my paintings may seem bombastic and full of movement, I consider them very still, full of the potential for movement, but not movement itself. I'm much more interested in the promise of something. You'll also notice at the bottom those dark shadow elements that sort of poke into the picture from diagonals. Those refer to shadows gleaned from looking at Russian landscape painters like Ivan Shishkin. Whenever you put a shadow, I think, behind the viewer, as if something's being cast that's out of sight, I think it makes the pictorial space a bit more elastic, and it makes the viewer feel, I think, a little more part of the web of the painting. A buddy of mine in any situation always asks the question, what does it have to do with Cezanne? And it annoys me. It's a pretentious question, but it's true. What does it have to do with Cezanne? One of the things I love so much about his work is the masterful bending of the laws of nature to fit the laws of art, to paraphrase Robert Rosenblum. I don't want to do one or the other. I want to stop at the bending process. How do I make the process of bending the content of my work? I am not just a painter, I'm also a bender. I'm trying to discover a place and craft it at the same time.